Welcome to the Black Belt Business Podcast. My name is Matthew Brenner, and today I'm with Sebastian Bates. He is the owner and founder of Warrior Academy Martial Arts. He's taught over 45,000 students over the last 15 years. Currently, active students is 6,000 in 7 different countries. I thought it was impressive that we have schools in 2 different states in the United States are next to each other. He's in 7 different countries, which is wild. 70% of those are developing countries. So 2,000 paying members and 4,000 on scholarship. So that's a big part of what he does today. And you're going to see how he teaches students across three different continents. And I don't know anyone else who teaches martial arts in this way, or this is their business model. And he's also the author of the best-selling book, Warrior Method. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Also an adrenaline junkie. Hope it's okay I say that. I know that when I started following you on social media for a while, one of the things I saw you did recently was heli-skiing, which is you get dropped off on a helicopter to go skiing. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I've got a past of skydiving and base jumping. I've done about 500 skydives and base jumps around the world. I had a very bad accident base jumping, essentially. And so for 8 years, I couldn't do any extreme sports. And so then I became a dad. I've got 2 kids. I've got one on the way. Last year, I found out I could still ski. My ankles still worked for skiing. And so I'm one of those people that as soon as they realize they can do something, just goes a little bit hard and does quite a lot with it. And within a year, I've done 5 weeks of skiing in the last year and 3 heli ski trips. And it's amazing. It's just great fun. It's the closest to extreme sport I think is reasonable as a dad of 3 without taking too much selfish risk. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously having kids is going to change your perspective, right?
Yeah, totally.
And probably get yelled at from the wife to do anything too extreme.
She knows what she got into, though.
Yeah, she knows what she signed up for. Tell me about this base jumping accent you had, because I heard the story, but for people who don't know you, I want to hear what happened because it's just wild to me.
Yeah, sure. Traveling and adventure was a huge part of my life. I grew up in the UK. My dad was in the airborne. He was a para and a former commando. So I used to watch him jump out of planes all the time when I was growing up. And so this is basically his fault. So I watching him jump out of planes all the time. I wanted to do skydiving when I was older, right? And so I remember when I first started teaching martial arts, and I finally had an income doing that as a sort of 19-year-old, 20-year-old. I started skydiving in my spare time. And so I was just teaching term time only after school clubs initially. And so all of the school holidays that the kids were off, I was running off to skydiving centers around the world and skydiving. And that took me on adventures all around the world, including America. And like I said to you just before this started, we were talking about America. I said, I've never done any of the touristy stuff. I've always gone to the middle of nowhere, Paris Valley and Idaho and Twin Falls for base jumping and stuff like that, where you go to do the jumping because in the UK, the weather's notoriously bad. You just sit and watch clouds all the time. So long story short, I got into skydiving. I did about 300 jumps skydiving and very quickly decided that I wanted to push that further into base jumping and started base jumping in Idaho on a base jumping course there from Prime Bridge and the local cliffs around. And then I got into wingsuit base jumping. And the wingsuit's designed to get you away from the cliff. And like any kind of martial artist, you understand that to really complete something and to do something well, you've got to do it with confidence, right? And you've got to kind of get to that point where there's the point of no return. And there are so many parallels between martial arts, extreme sports, and business. And one of those really is, if you're going to do it, go all out. And you can't have any hesitation, right? And so this is one of the real big lessons that wingsuit base taught me. And so the whole mindset around that was fascinating to me. And I found myself as a part of this extreme sports group. I think there's about 20 of us at the time who were really pushing human flight forward with wingsuit base jumping. And I did about 200 or 300 jumps. Eventually ended up in Switzerland, and my 7th jump of the day ended in a complete disaster. Essentially, I jumped off the cliff. That all went well. You dive down, pick up some air, and then you follow the cliff along, go past the waterfall, come back into open space, slow down your descent, pull out the parachute from behind you, the pilot chute, which pulls out the main canopy. Main canopy came out fine, but I realized I was going straight towards some telephone lines. And so I had to make an emergency turn. But when I tried to unzip my wingsuit, because it's basically like a straitjacket, right? The left zipper was jammed. And so I could only use the right arm. So I unzipped the right arm, had to use the right arm to turn the canopy, turned the canopy so aggressively that the canopy basically collapsed and I dropped 50 foot. Miraculously survived, but I basically broke both feet, both legs, both ankles. The left heel bone exploded, the tendons blew off the left foot, and so I was essentially permanently disabled when I was 24. I
Did
was
you
told I could
think
never walk again by the surgeons in Switzerland and the surgeons in the UK as well. And so that was it. That was my life. It was. I literally went from just starting my career as a professional fighter in Thailand with my first Muay Thai fight, coming back, training with some of the UK's top boxers. I was going to pursue more fights within the UK and then back in Thailand again. But had this parallel of extreme sports within my life as well. Had this injury which basically stopped me from doing professional stand-up fighting from 24. And so that's the base jumping accident. What happened next was kind of a miracle. But yeah, that gives you an insight into the accident itself.
so? Why do you think you're attracted to high adrenaline activities like martial arts, and then the next level being like skydiving and then base jumping, right? Like, why? What attracts you to those things?
I grew up in a very competitive environment. Military home, military family, four siblings always competing with each other. Sports and competing in sports and doing well in sports was very normal for us. Most family meals would end in arm wrestling. It's kind of crazy when I look back just how competitive we were. But all the siblings have gone on to do quite well in whatever they pursued because of that mindset. And then I think the adventure side, for me, adventure has always been the highest priority. It's like nothing in life is as important as squeezing as much life out of life as possible. And it really felt for me for so many years that I wasn't really experiencing life unless I was really pushing it. And I think that you can look at that how you will. A lot of people have a very different relationship to risk to other people. And so the way they process risk is actually fundamentally different. I did an interview with someone recently who was a psychologist, and he works with young people and entrepreneurs with ADHD. And the stuff he was talking about, I was like, wow, it's like he was describing me. And I never considered maybe I've got ADHD. But when I listened to what he was saying and the way he was describing it, I was like, I've probably got ADHD, because he was describing it. It was like, I'm not sure I just didn't get diagnosed with anything. But when I was listening to him speak, it's like this: you're more likely to do things that are much higher risk, right? Like you can really focus on things that you care about, but you're very dismissive or don't focus on things you don't care about. You can sit down, I can sit down on a computer and design something, or if I'm really into it, right, for 15 hours and I won't get tired, I'll forget to eat. If I'm creating a new project or plan or whatever it is, right? But if I'm not interested in the conversation I'm having with someone, I can drift off within 10 seconds. And so it's really interesting when I look at that. There's probably elements of ADHD there, which pulled me into a high adrenaline, risk-taking environment. Now, what's really cool about that is within entrepreneurship, you need to have a healthy tolerance for risk to be able to push entrepreneurship. And what I'm now finding out really is entrepreneurship and philanthropy are basically the same thing. You are out there creatively solving problems in the world with often limited resources and using the network around you to solve the problems that are out there that you see. And so, yeah, to answer your question now, I guess there's lots of variables that might, nature, as they say, right? Nature loads the gun and nurture fires it.
Yeah, it might be. You ever see the movie? I think it's called like Free Climb or Free something with Alex Honnold. He free climbs,
Yeah.
and so they scanned his brain, and he was like slightly on the spectrum where, right, he was like slightly autistic, and like that, and he didn't feel fear the same way that other people do. He didn't feel it. And you'd see it in the interactions he had with his girlfriend at the time that were kind of cringy to watch, because he would just say things that were very rude, but like just how he felt in the moment.
Yeah.
And it wasn't weird to him. Like, it wasn't scary to take these leaps. It was just like, that's where he felt free. That's where it was fun. So I think to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a little bit psycho, because
you know what was really interesting? If you look at some of the top entrepreneurs on the planet, right, you probably wouldn't want to be in their heads, because there's probably a lot of chaos or even previous trauma. They've got to have something they're running towards and a really good reason to run towards it in their minds, and something they're running away from. I think you can say the same thing about anyone who's done really well in life at any one particular thing. I don't just mean they've done really well in life. They've reached the top like 0.001%. To get to that level, you almost need to have such a disgusting work ethic and a different way of looking at the world and life. You've probably been through something in your younger years in your life which has changed the way in which you perceive your life and your place in it. And so, like I said, you talk about him being on the spectrum, that sort of stuff, and there's nature. And you talk about nurture, the environment we grow into, the people around us, the influence from parents, the opportunities we might get. And for me, it's really fascinating to look back because you can kind of join the dots, right? You can join the dots and think about why you do what you do. But what was interesting was there was never a lack of fear. So whenever I did all these things within extreme sports or within martial arts or within business, there was never a lack of fear. I would feel the fear. I think that's something martial arts taught me, right? It's breathing through that fear. Like I would feel that fear when I'm standing on the edge of a cliff to the point where my legs are physically shaking, right? Like my nervous system is forcing my body to completely shake and I've got no control over it. And one of the things one of my mentors taught me was if you can stand on one foot and slow your breathing down while you're just on normal ground, then you can do it on a cliff. There's no difference apart from your mentality. And so I wouldn't jump unless I could slow my breathing down and stand on one foot. And it became a bit of a ritual for me. But it's interesting because we learn in martial arts that it's not the absence of fear, right? And it's doing it even if you're feeling fear. And I think that's something I want to pass on to my kids. It's that element of courage. And I think that courage is so important. And it literally sets you up for a very different life if you understand how courage works and how it influences the decisions you make.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Action despite fear. And I think also action despite boredom, right? I think like one of the things we used to tell our martial arts students all the time is we used to say, hey, there's 2 rules in martial arts training we have here. The first rule is always show respect. So we do yes, sir, no, sir, stuff like that. And the second rule is you have to have fun. And we used to say that all the time. But then over the years, I've kind of changed my mindset on that, where now it feels awkward to say that because you're not always going to have fun, right? I'm sure there's times in skydiving or base jumping, even though that's like the most adrenaline activity you could possibly do, it's not always fun, right? Like if you're really good at jiu-jitsu and you're a competitor and you're just drilling, it's not always fun. Competition can be fun. Like learning a new move can be fun, but sometimes it's boring. You have to be okay with the same boring action without seeing the benefit or the result from that boring action over and over and over and over again.
Totally. I think there's a place for fun, and it's really important when you've got young people in your clubs, right? If you're teaching young people, it's so important. They've got all these small goals to go for and loads of small quick wins, and they need a lot of external reinforcement, right? Extrinsic motivation to keep them going, rewards, all this sort of stuff. And then you slowly, you look at the typical belt system in any martial art. Early on, the belts are quite quick to get, and then they get longer and longer until it's years between them sometimes, right? And that's typically because that motivation, that kind of extrinsic motivation has been replaced by intrinsic. And so you don't need to motivate someone because they've got that discipline instead. And so then it kind of reminds me of the way in which I look at life, which is happiness is great, and fun is great, but it's also this sort of fleeting emotion, right? We experience it for a minute. I could be really happy chatting to you right now, and then I could suddenly get a phone call, and now I'm not happy anymore, right? Some bad news or whatever it is. And so for me, what's more important than happiness is fulfillment. And if you look at what fun is, you've got several types of fun, right? Type 1, you enjoy it. You're having a nice meal. You eat, the meal tastes good. You're enjoying it, right? That's type 1 fun. Type 2 fun, you are about to do a professional fight. You jump into the ring. You're really nervous, but you do it anyway. You don't necessarily enjoy that, especially if it's a really tough one. But afterwards, you're filled with pride. You've got this feeling of accomplishment, and you look back on it, and you've got stories about it. That was type 2 fun. And so for me, I found so much growth and fulfillment in filling my life with a lot of type 2 fun. It was delaying gratification. It was not necessarily doing things that I feel I'm going to get an instant reward doing. And I guess that's one of the things that martial arts teaches us, right? Like when you look back at your own growth and journey through martial arts, I guarantee that there's this moment where you look back where I didn't need someone else to motivate me. I was just intrinsically motivated to Did you experience?
Absolutely. I remember even as I got older that I would give myself extra challenges like for my next belt that no one would even know about. Okay, I'm going to do 100 sit-ups a day every day
Mm.
until my next belt. Right. And I've done like nutrition ones before, or I've done, okay, I'm not going to drink as an adult. Okay, I'm not going to drink for my third degree for 3 months, not going to have any alcohol. Right. It's just
Yeah.
something that make it extra
Mm.
difficult
Mm.
because that's what's exciting, right? It's fun to have a challenge that someone doesn't give you, but you put on yourself because that's that intrinsic motivation, right?
Yeah.
Extrinsic is like a parent tells you what to do something, right? If you're a kid, if you do this, then you'll get more time with the iPad or you'll get this candy or whatever. But intrinsic is always going to be more powerful. Right. And I think that's
Yeah.
what people get wrong about sales in general. Is like when they're selling their martial arts program, is a lot of times they try to use extrinsic motivation where it's just, oh, it'll be this price, but if you join today, it'll be this other price, it'll be lower, or you'll get these bonuses, or they try to use like certain sales techniques that can be like kind of pushy. But
Mm.
that's extrinsic motivation. What you want to do is you want to tap into someone's intrinsic motivation. Like why do they actually want
Yeah.
or why do you want to be there, right? And if you tap into that intrinsic motivation, you don't necessarily need any like funny sales tactic, right? You just need to
Yeah.
find out what they want and actually give it to them. And people overcomplicate that, especially in martial arts, where a lot of times almost martial arts school owners could be or operators could be like, if they don't want to join, they don't have to join. But it's yeah, but we got to help them get past themselves. People are fearful of martial arts. They're scared of getting hurt. They're scared of being embarrassed. If they're a kid, not as much. Kids are probably just want to be fun, have fun, right? Especially in
Yeah.
the beginning. But if we're going to get more adults involved, most of the time they're going to be they're scared of getting hurt or being embarrassed. We have to get them past that and be like, okay, like why are you actually here? Why is that important to you? And every single person is going to have a different reason, and we got to tap into that.
I think it's solving a bigger problem, and often that takes a bit of educating from us to the customer, to the parent, to the member. Right? It's like a lot of parents come to us. I want my child to have a black belt, and my point of view is, well, you don't really care about the black belt. What you really want, having worked with a lot of parents, is you want to have your child develop a character like a black belt. It's like they want to have a black belt character, we call it, right? And so really there's that point, a transition point from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation for me is something I always say to parents, where you go through this process and eventually you see this transition. And I'll explain to them, like, the most typical way I see this is you're packing their bag into the car, you're trying to get them to go, to class every single week from their white belt, yellow tag, yellow belt, whatever it is, in taekwondo, for instance, right? And it's frustrating and it's difficult, and you've got to have so much patience as a parent, and you've got to be committed and be consistent. But by the time they're a black tag going for their black belt, they are the ones packing your bag, trying to get you into the car to get to class on time because they want to do 3 or 4 sessions per week. And it's like that really tangible, visible transition that you see in a young person. That is the goal, I think, for a parent, right? It's like, I want my child to grow into someone who's got that character, where we call it the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, concentration, where they show these traits, which really means that as a parent, you've done the best you can possibly do to set them up for a happy and compelling life and successful life as an adult.
I love that. Let's transition into the business because you have such a different business model. I don't understand it at all, and I want to hear all about it. So I know that. So right now you have 6,000 students in 7 countries. 70% of those are developing countries. 2,000 paying, 4,000 on scholarship. Did you like? How did you go from just like, all right, I teach at a school, or maybe I just run a school, to like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing where I have schools in different countries and they're on scholarship, and I have to get funding. I'm assuming you have to get outside funding for that, unless you're digging all to your own pocket. How did this happen? And let's start from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'll take you back to how it first started, right? So I was 19 years old. I was traveling around Thailand and doing a lot of training out there. I probably spent about a year and a half on Thai boxing camps over my early 20s and late teens. Came back to the UK, and I wanted to become a personal trainer because I wanted to do something physical. My first gig as a personal trainer was actually taking over a rundown inner city Thai boxing club. And when I first walked in there, it was so full of testosterone. People were just there to let off steam. It was mostly young men, kind of 15 to 17 years old, who were often going through difficult transitions at home, sleeping rough, drugs, domestic violence. They were from abusive homes. alcohol, whatever it is, right? They weren't from good places. They weren't necessarily bad people. They were just in a very difficult situations and transitions. Within a year, I transformed their life. And the reality there was they, rather than coming in, kicking their shoes off and starting a fight, as soon as they walked in, they were parking their shoes, they were bowing as they entered, they were shaking hands, calling each other sir. There was a fundamental shift to their character. And for the first time ever, they had this moral compass directing their life. And so the traditional background I had in Taekwondo, let's say, growing up, and then that combined with the very practical training I did with full contact Muay Thai and boxing, really appealed to them. And so I found that in order to win their respect, I had to spar with them every single session. Whatever I asked them to do fitness wise, I had to do double in front of them, right? And so eventually they were like, I'm an aspirational role model for them. Any martial artist or martial arts instructor looking at this or listening to this right now will relate to that. You've got to be the person in the room who can do more than your students, especially when they're young, and especially if they are coming from a very difficult background. You've got to show them that you're the guy who can help them through that and create that role model image for them. And so when I got to the end of that year, we had 15 national champions in kickboxing. We took them to a kickboxing competition and we won 15 first places. Incredible. The reality check for me was, what if I got to these guys earlier? What if I could work with them when they were 4 years old, or 5 years old, or 8 years old? What would be the shift in their life and the different decisions they would have made? And so I had this epiphany that I wanted to work with younger children, because ultimately, when we look back on our life, it's basically like this web of positive or negative decisions that influences what we do in life. And so that's what I did. We started with after school clubs for kids. Then it was renting out village halls in Somerset and Wiltshire and the countryside of England. We had about 500 students there. I had a small team, about 3 or 4, and we wanted to scale it. I started to really invest in my business education, learning about entrepreneurship. I came from the countryside, so for the first 5 years of running this business, I'd never met another entrepreneur. I just learned some stuff in books. Both my parents were government jobs. Mum was a physiotherapist, NHS, dad was in the army. So I didn't come from an entrepreneurial background, but I basically started a business at 19. And so following on from that, I wanted to launch in London because I thought that's the nearest city. I wanted to test it somewhere urban. Had a friend in Dubai, visited Dubai. I thought we could give it a shot over here. I liked the adventure side of it. It looked exciting to me. And so I was married at the time. We just got married. I had a 1-year-old daughter. He moved to Dubai, set it up, and it took off. People really related to what we were talking about, especially the character development aspect, what we were doing, and the soft skill development, the way in which we mentor children through bullying and difficult transitions, really appealed to people, especially expats. And so we doubled down on that. And that, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I want to go back to the 500 students because
Yeah.
that's like very impressive for any martial arts school. How did you, without any business mentor, just obviously maybe martial arts mentors, I'm assuming, because you learned from when you were a kid. How did you get to 500 students? And what does the revenue look like? Because I know every country is different, right? Some schools will have higher revenue, or you can charge certain tuitions in certain areas. What does that look like at 500 students in the countryside? And
500 students in most martial arts academies in the UK, if they've done very well over 3 to 5 years, will probably reach 300 to 500 students if they've got multiple locations and they're doing it full time. You can't charge much for martial arts in the UK. This is one of the things that's very different to the US and to the UAE. So you're looking at $30 to $50 a month is kind of like the typical rate for 1 or 2 classes a week. Martial arts is, no one does it full time in the UK. Like, it's very rare. Most people have a full time job and do martial arts separately. And for me, it was full time from the very beginning. And so I guess,
why do you think that is? Like, why is there a cultural difference that people don't do it in the UK like they do in the States or Australia?
I don't know why it is. I think there's an economic aspect there as well. I just don't think people invest as much into that. It's like we don't invest as much into gyms as we do, as the US do. There aren't as many gyms or opportunities out there for that sort of stuff. Kids clubs, I think there's a lot more opportunity in the US. There certainly is in the UAE. I can't put a figure on it exactly why it's like that, but it just is. It's very hard to get any breakthrough in the UK, particularly in the countryside, right? If you're in the countryside in the US, you're listening to this, it might be similar in that it's actually quite challenging to to build a large martial arts organization because there's simply no density of population. And so that's the kind of point we got to. And it was like, we need to expand somewhere urban. That was the goal. Of course, when you expand somewhere urban, there's lots of competition. So you've got to know your stuff. You've got to be good at what you do. Especially in the UAE, like the UAE is completely ruthless when it comes to competition. They expect the best of the best here. You can charge a lot for what you do, but you have to deliver. You have to be very good and over deliver on the promises you make. And so if you do that, you'll do really well. If you don't, you'll last a year. That's the reality over here. And so we scaled to the UAE.
Wait, Matt, what gave you the confidence to go from the countryside where was it? Wiltshire? Where was
Wiltshire,
it?
yeah, Wiltshire, Somerset.
I don't know if I was going to say the word right. As Wiltshire. What gave you the confidence to go from there and I'm going to go open in the UAE because your friend lived there and it looked glamorous? Because it wasn't like, it sounds like, okay, they were paying somewhat of a lower tuition. They weren't doing it necessarily full time. It doesn't seem like, at least for me from the outside, that you struck it rich. And you're like, okay, I have a lot of money now. I'm going to go to the UAE.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So why even do that? Why not just go to London or a more populated city near you and just work a martial arts school there?
So I think if you're gonna move somewhere and you're weighing up the risk and the reward of moving somewhere, for me it was like, if I'm going to do this and put all the effort into doing it, and it's going to be London, there's loads of clubs in London, and you kind of analyze actually the benefits to me launching out here were probably greater than doing it in London. And it could be that we still launch in London at some point, but I guess the market research we did gave us confidence. The fact that I had a team in the UK who could manage the business, so I wasn't necessarily on the tools, shall we say, like teaching every day. I could step back a bit. That gave me confidence. I could limit the risk. So I did a few trips to Dubai where I ran a couple of after-school clubs, and I thought, yep, this works. We're getting traction. So you take little steps, right? If you want to do a base jump with a wingsuit off a cliff, you don't just put one on and jump off. You do a lot of skydives, you build up the muscle memory, you get very good at that, and then you take the next step and the next step, and maybe you get training, you use specific courses, you understand the kit, and then do you see what I'm saying? You can get used to anything in life if you do the right steps. And so we did the right steps, we mitigated risk where we could, launched over here, and within 3 months of launching here, the royal family in the UAE, the ruler of Dubai, and his family picked up on the work we were doing and asked me to visit the palace to train the whole family.
Wait, so, what? The royal family reached out to you and was like, hey, teach us?
We've seen your Facebook adverts.
Your Facebook advertising was targeting the royal family.
Well, you got to think big, don't you? And so,
whoever does your ads, I want them to do my ads. I'm trying to reach the president in the U.S. Yeah, that's amazing.
So the president would sign up his family, then that'd be a pretty good agency, wouldn't I? So very quickly, I was flying with the royal family around the world. London, Dubai, London, Dubai, London, Dubai. In this incredible lifestyle where I was teaching in their home in London for 1 week and then teaching in palace in Dubai the next week, and so I was in this constant state of traveling and teaching while also launching these clubs, and that was going really well.
They were paying, like they're financing everything?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So that was the big thing that changed for you, it sounds, was like, okay, the royal family got involved and then they were
that didn't impact our clubs, but it impacted our confidence in that we've got something of high value.
So did they feel like this is going to be a game changer for the country, so they want to invest in it? Like, why do they want to be involved?
It was more personal than that, really. I think children who grew up in families, royal families, let's say, they experience the same challenges that other kids do, right? And often they have to deal with a lot of pressure, a lot of expectation, and so they need a lot of mentoring. And so it was a real privilege to be able to offer that for about a year. So that was the beginning of our journey in Dubai. Believe it or not, it was amazing because at that point in our journey, I was living in a 1-bed studio flat with my wife and our newborn daughter, and we barely had enough money to run the business. I took £100,000 of credit card debt to launch the business in Dubai, and it was so risky. When I look back, I'm like, that was based on our financial situation at the time. 5 years ago, that was probably the greatest financial risk I've taken. It obviously paid off, but it was super risky to do that. Like I said, we took the small steps, we mitigated risk. But at the end of the day, like I said at the very beginning of this call, what does martial arts teach you? It teaches you can't hesitate. If you're going to do it, you have to do it, right? If you're going to commit to something, you have to go all out. You can't just stand on the edge of the cliff and have one foot on, one foot off and see if it goes well. You've got to confidently jump and throw everything you've got into making it work. We did that and it paid off. That's basically how we expanded into this country.
Was it, what were you thinking when you're traveling back and forth between London and Dubai with the royal family? You're like, oh my God, how did I fall into this? This is
Yeah,
crazy.
some real like reality check moments. This is incredible. This is crazy. You're going from working with the average working class family in Somerset, Wiltshire, to working with one of the richest families on the planet. And so it's a culture shock to some degree. But it's also, I'm used to working with parents. And as incredible as all these families that we've now worked with are, they face the same challenges. And it's actually quite humbling to realize that we're all human, right? And now when I sit here today, we still train the royal family. In fact, we train lots of members of the royal family every single week. But we also train in some of the biggest slums in the world. I've got 1,500 students in the biggest slum in Africa. Next week, I'm teaching kids for a week in the biggest slum in Mumbai, in India. So the diversity of our students is so vast. When you think about the types of people we train and where we train them, and then you consider that they face similar challenges from a character development point of view. Obviously, the transitions they go through, we're taking kids from homelessness and poverty and abuse often to safety, community, and transitioning to full-time education. But we're also taking kids from growing up in the palace to being able to be in the public eye and to be able to speak confidently in public. And so there's a lot of differences, but there's also a lot of similarities when it comes to subsequent development. So yeah, to carry on that story about how we grew, we then grew the Warrior Academy in Dubai we had several hundred students, about 300 students. And then I was investing a lot in my education within psychology. I did a lot of work with Dr. DeMartini to develop our bullying program. I wrote a book called Not a Victim, which is our 6-step method for basically transitioning kids through bullying very quickly. And it was really useful working with him a lot with that. But I was in Africa with him. I was in Johannesburg, and I got a phone call to say that the COVID thing that we thought was just going to be a problem for China had now reached Dubai, and our clubs had all been shut down. And so my wife, who's also an instructor, she was managing our clubs while also looking after our child at the time. And she was like, they've shut everything down. And so we lost our entire Dubai business overnight during COVID, and we had to pivot online. It's the same old story that you hear from all the martial arts instructors. Everyone has to do training online and so on. So we don't need to talk about that. We've all been there and done it. Most people listen to this are martial arts instructors, right? So everyone gets that. Yeah. Everyone gets that. And the concept of virtual learning probably sends shivers down their spines as they listen to this, right? And I'm sure they've created incredible digital assets, which now they leverage, and it's very useful still today. But it wasn't the same, was it, as doing in-person classes? And so we made a really bold decision during COVID. Everyone was running out of commercial property. We found one right in the center of Dubai, and it was empty, completely empty. 200 units within this big it's a bit like a mall, but not quite like a mall. And right in the center of Dubai. And we decided to take up our first commercial unit in Dubai when everyone was running out of it like it was a burning building, and no one could go to it. It was all shut down. We then negotiated incredible rates, a great deal, a great contract to be the only person in that building. And so we launched there. And within 3 or 4 months...
You purchased it or you
leased it? No, rent, just lease.
Okay.
So we certainly didn't have any money to purchase. And so within 3 or 4 months, we had 100 students sign up to that. Within a year, there was about 200. That was the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And I would say by 2023, we had about 1,000 students in there. So we became the largest martial arts academy in the country within 2 years of having nothing at all. So after being shut down, we then pivoted created this organization, which we've now got almost 500 students in Abu Dhabi. We've got 3 academies side by side there, and we've got 2 academies in Dubai. So we've got about just over 1,500 students right now in the UAE. So we're the largest academy in the country here. We've got an amazing team. There's about, I would say, 70 full-time staff that manage everything at the moment.
So how much could you charge in the UAE compared to what you charge in the countryside in Wiltshire?
So here's the thing as well. So I think we're probably similar to the US. It's probably a couple of $100 a month is the UAE prices. If you look at the UK, it's probably more like $60 a month, $70 a month. So the difference is there, right? But also in the UAE, there's no tax, or there's low tax. You've got 5% VAT, 9% corporation tax. There's no income tax. So if you're smart, you can reinvest that into growing the business and be clever with it so that you're not just taking money out of the business, but you're using it to grow the business. And I think reinvesting in your company is probably the smartest thing you can do, but people don't really do it enough. I certainly didn't the first 5 years, right? So my first 5 years of running a business, the money I made, because I was teaching so much, I felt like I wanted to pull that money out and use that for adventures. So I spent that on skydiving, and it was amazing. I had amazing experiences until my mid-20s. And after that, based on the accident, having kids, my mindset totally shifted. And so my focus really became on reinvesting in the business. And that's what we did. Took loads of risks, reinvested in the business, and analyzed the numbers and followed the metrics. And this is something that a lot of people don't do. They kind of guess rather than knowing their numbers, knowing where they're going, and knowing where to invest their time, energy, and money.
Yeah, exactly. If you ask the regular martial arts school how much money or how many students they make from like a Facebook ad versus referral versus someone who just visited their website, they have no idea. How much they sell in retail, I have no idea, right? We call it business vitals, and we go over with our staff. If you go to the doctor or the hospital, they look at your vitals, like how you survive. So we call it our business vitals. And each day I get a report from the staff that has our vitals in it. And I get a text message. It says new students, new leads, Facebook leads, website leads, earned leads is from a referral, or maybe they did some sort of community event and people gave them information. And I guess if you don't do that as a martial arts school owner, you need to be data driven, right? Every big business is data driven, not feeling driven.
Yeah.
So can I ask about like the economics of having 1,000 students or 1,500 students?
Yeah. So in terms of our revenue, it's over 3 million, 3 to 4 million. Profit is 7 figures, and then there's about 60 staff for our paying members. And then we've got the charity. The charity is really interesting because several years ago, when I started the Warrior Academy, I found myself wanting to help a lot of students who couldn't afford the membership, right? And if you look at the sorts of students they're kids who have come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Maybe they're going through separation, divorce. Their parents are on military tours for 6 months. A big mixture. We work with welfare officers and this sort of stuff as well, who are referring us to kids. And I basically said to my team, look, you've got free reign to give up to 10% of our students who you onboard free memberships as scholarships. And the impact of that was so profound. So if you look at it, I'll give you one example. We were helping this one family who couldn't afford the membership with free tuition. And their child was a teenager, they were going through depression, severe depression, and they were suicidal. And so as a martial arts instructor, you know how powerful the mentoring that we give really is. And so that mum wrote into us to say we literally saved their child's life from the mentoring we gave. And it's little stories like that really kind of lit a fire in the hearts of our instructors and our team. We then partnered with a children's hospice, so we were giving free tuition to the siblings of children who are terminally ill. So if you imagine you've got 2 kids, one of them has cancer, you're told they've got a few months to live. It's devastating for the whole family, and sometimes it's more than 3 months or whatever it is, right, that they're in this hospice. And so all of your attention and effort and energy and love and care tends to go to that one child who's very sick. And so the other child is still going through all the stuff that kids go through, bullying, adolescence, boyfriends, girlfriends, all these difficult things that they've got to process and try to understand, while they've also got to understand from a young age the passing or the eventual passing of their sibling. And so we were mentoring them, giving them a community and mentoring through all of that. And so the letters we had and the emails we had were just so heartwarming, and they brought so much fulfillment to our team. And so there was this giving culture at the heart of our organization. And so then fast forward 10 years, we're in Dubai, we're doing really well. We're working with royal family, we're working with some incredible affluent families who can afford the training, no problem. We're making huge impact to their life and their family's life. But I wanted to maintain this sense of giving. And so rather than giving out scholarships to children in UAE, where most families are doing quite well, especially if they've got kids and they can afford to raise kids here because it's expensive to do, what we thought we'd do is start martial arts clubs in the poorest places on the planet. And so at the time, I had 2 kids, and there were 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 at the time. And I flew to Kenya with my dad. My dad, ex-colonel in the army, been on peacekeeping missions around the world, as well as being at war in some of the most difficult places to visit on the planet as well. And he left the army to become the regional director of one of the UK's largest army charities, helping veterans, that sort of stuff. But he really loved working with kids, and he wanted to work with a charity with kids. And so I basically brought him on, employed him as the head of operations for the charity. So he then worked in the charity with me. We visited Kenya for the first time. We did a 2,000-kilometer road trip across Kenya, where we went from orphanage to slum to homeless shelter to orphanage to all these different places. And there was one place which I call the point of no return for me, which was a homeless shelter in a place called Thika in Nairobi, or Thika in Nairobi. And it was a converted pigsty. And I remember going into there and thinking, looking at these boys who were 7 to 9 years old, not far from the age of my kids, and looking at them, and they were found on the street, they were homeless. Some of them were malnourished, they were smaller than the other kids. They were covered in bruises and scratches, some of them burns. They'd been abused at home, so they ran away from home. Eventually were homeless, got picked up by authorities, abused by authorities, ran away from them. Substance abuse, addicted to substances at the age of 9. They've got 6 months in this homeless shelter to be transitioned into full-time education. And if they don't do that, they're basically within the authorities or on the street again. And so I was in this position where I was like, how can I possibly make an impact here as a martial arts instructor? I'm an imposter syndrome, right? I'm a martial arts instructor from the countryside of England. How can I possibly help this 9-year-old homeless boy who's been found walking along the railways in Nairobi, and he's got 6 months to transition into full-time education? When I gave a uniform to one of those boys, I saw his face completely light up. It was actually one of the first bits of clothing he had owned, at least for many years or months. And he suddenly, when you give a uniform to a child for the first time, in the Warrior Academy, we make all of our students earn the uniform through a behavior test, a 7-day behavior test at home. When you give a child a uniform, it's not just like giving them clothes. They become a martial artist, right? It's like they have such vivid imaginations, they then become this martial artist. And as a martial artist, they want to be a black belt, right? So they want to grow into that role. And what I realized was the greatest gift you can give these children, outside of all the immediate support and money they need to survive and thrive what they're doing, is actually a journey. If I can take these children on a journey where they look at their world and their place in the world differently, and they change the decisions they make, taking you back to the story I told about the Thai boxing club, which influenced this, we can change the positive web of decisions that they make. So they get that chance, they get their one shot of being in education, they stick at it. And that's what we did. Now we've had those 30 boys transition from homelessness into full-time education, and they're on an 8-year journey where we'll eventually provide them with employment as well. And so what started off as just 30 children in that homeless shelter is now 4,000 underprivileged children in orphanages, homeless shelters and slums across India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Kenya, Uganda, and even we're now in the favelas of Rio. One of the questions you had at the very beginning was, how do we fundraise for this? And probably quite naively, I didn't do any fundraising. I was paying myself. I was spending about $10,000 a month of my own money on building this charity. And it got to the point where I was like, our big goal is to reach 10,000 children. I can't do that with my business alone. Without the business suffering, I can't do that alone. And so what I've now done is I've created a Patreon program where I'm taking about 20 entrepreneurs on a 3-year journey. And the 3-year journey is to help us create the largest martial arts organization for underprivileged children on the planet, to get us from 4,000 children to 10,000. I launched that last month, and within the last 4 weeks, we've raised about $350,000. My goal is to reach at least $700,000 from patrons, which then gives us enough funds to do 3 years of mentoring for these children and to reach that target. So that's what we're up to. And it's really quite amazing for me to see how fulfilling it can be. If you're listening to this and you've got a business, you might be a martial arts instructor, you might not. Maybe you've got a successful martial arts academy, or you just love business and you've learned a lot running your business. One of the things I would say is the skills that you've developed in building what you've built are identical to the skills you need to build a charity. And for me, there are so many things that we can do within our business, small changes where we leverage our current business assets to create more of an impact in our communities or the wider world, right? To solve bigger problems out there in the world. And I guarantee by doing that, not only will you make that impact and change people's lives, but you'll massively improve and scale the fulfillment you feel from running your business. And here's the thing. When you build a business that's successful in any industry, you get to a point where it's like you want to do something which helps more people. And it's less about the finances and more about the actual lives you change. The benefit we've got as martial artists is that we innately have something which benefits people. We've already got something that changes lives, right? You've seen it with your own students, haven't you? And so has everyone listening to this. So the little things you can do, like reaching out to your community to onboard a scholarship students, is so easy to do. It doesn't cost you any money to have 10% of your students as scholarship students, but it makes a huge impact to you, your fulfillment, and also to the experience your instructors will have working with you. And so I guess that's my big message, mate. It's looking at your business differently, looking at entrepreneurship differently. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with this Patreon program, is take these 25 entrepreneurs, and we've still got some spaces left, on a journey where they look at entrepreneurship and they look at their place in the world as an entrepreneur differently.
And then if someone wants to get involved in that, how would they find you?
The best way to do that is to go to thebatesfoundation.com. And so there's a waiting list to join the Patreon program. The other benefit of that is we've got some incredible people on this. So every year, it's a 3-year program. I take everyone on a tour of our scholarship academies in Kenya. We're now the largest martial arts academy in Kenya with over 2,000 students there. We will take you on a tour to Nepal. We've got clubs in the Himalayas near base camp Everest. We'll take you on a tour to India. So you'll see every year you'll go on this kind of 5-day tour with this group of entrepreneurs. And then every year we do a networking event, like a VIP dinner in Dubai or in London. So you'll actually get a chance to meet these other entrepreneurs and who are very well connected and come to the events with us as well. We've also got Jay Shetty's media team doing a 3-year documentary that we hope to pitch to Netflix in 3 years' time to show the building of this charity and how you can use your business as a force for good.
That's very cool. How do you find instructors that are willing to go to Kenya and teach and live there? Right? Like, I feel like
we don't ever. What I don't want to do is to send a British person over there and be like the knight in shining armor and look at me, I'm the savior of the day. We never do that. We hire locally. It's really important to me that if I've got a group of kids growing up in the slums of the biggest slum in Africa, Kibera slums, for example, that we hire and find local role models who have gone through what the kids have gone through, who are relatable. And also we have the benefit of then providing employment. So we provide employment to 15 to 20 local martial arts instructors in all of these local areas. We give them a career path as well. So it's hiring locally that we do. One of the big challenges I found is actually the shocking reality that so many orphanages, for example, are corrupt. You'll send your money direct to an orphanage and it will just go missing. And so I think that a lot of people have put off charities because they don't know where their money is actually going. And so for us, transparency is really important. We actually don't, what we do is we look for a local charity. So let's say I want to start a club in the favelas of Rio, which we've just done. We'll find a contact on the ground who can help us. We'll interview 10 orphanages and then we'll go and visit them. We'll fly out there, we'll visit them, we'll have a local contact that we know and trust, visit them. We'll do loads of due diligence and we'll pick the one that we think we want to partner with. We then find the local instructor ourselves and we pay them a rate to teach in that orphanage. So none of these orphanages actually get any money from us. I think that's really key because if you're donating to a charity, I think it's really important you know where your funds are going. I think a lot of people don't know where it goes. And I think there's huge admin costs with a lot of charities. And I think it puts a lot of people off. And so we basically mitigated risk by doing that with a lot of the stuff we do.
So train the local, so you just find a local martial arts instructor.
Yeah.
And do you train them on your character development skills? How long does that take to train them on it? How do you make sure they're teaching the right things? How do you do that?
So we've got an incredible virtual learning environment. There's about 700 classes that we've filmed. And so basically everyone in the Warrior Academy teaches the same class every single week. Our UK team, Matt Hillier, who's our UK area manager, he manages the team. He does Zoom training with them every single week, the instructors. And then they film, we spot check classes with filming. So that we use WhatsApp to basically check their classes every single day. And so we've got this process in place where the orphanages or the homeless shelters or the slum areas or whatever, the rescue centres will film the classes going on, spot checking, send to us, we analyse, and then we help support them with their professional development. For instance, we've just sponsored 30 kids in Kenya, Nepal, Sri Lanka and India to have passports for the first time. We're flying them to Dubai to compete in what we're calling the Warrior World Championships, our in-house World Championships, where we're connecting all of our students around the world, which will grow every year. We expect about 500, 700 to come to that. But for the first time, it's all of these guys, it's the first time they've ever left their villages. But the instructors will also get passports. So they then come over and then we have time with them as well. We can do even more professional development with them and more training with them. But long story short, we've got a remote training program which works really well. And then we go and visit them kind of every 6 to 12 months.
Wow. And then now that you have a family of 2 kids plus 1 on the way, are you traveling back and forth between these countries constantly? Like, how do you balance that with your family and your wife who's giving birth soon?
Yeah, so I've got an amazing team. I certainly don't do all this on my own. I think one of the things you've got to realize as a business owner is you can't do everything on your own. Entrepreneurship is a bit like life. It's this process of learning to let go. It's a team sport. I might have come up with the idea for the Warrior Academy and I might be driving the purpose and the vision behind it, but I'm certainly not the one doing all the work. There's an incredible team behind me who just works so hard, who are so passionate about everything we do. And it's my job to make sure I've got the right people, right? I kind of see growing a business a bit like raising a child. So you go through the infancy stage where they don't really know what they're doing. They're slipping up a bit. And you, as a parent, you're kind of like figuring out as well for the first time. And then they get a bit older and they want more independence. And you've got to learn to let them go and find their own way a little bit. And then as they get even older, they're teenagers and actually they're getting a lot of their advice and they're making their own decisions and they're being even more influenced by the people around them. When your business is a teenager, it's your role as the founder is really important still, right? As a parent, when your child's a teenager, you go from like full-time carer to more of a mentor. And so you basically instill these values and hope that they come back to you for advice so that you can keep them on the right path. And you've kind of got this eye out for them, like you've got this eye out for your business to course correct. If you see it going slightly left or right, you say, this is what we stand for. These are our values. This is our mission. This is our vision. This is where we're going. And so I see a lot of parallels there. Building the right team. So to answer your question, I don't travel a huge amount. I don't need to. We're probably in Dubai 8 months of the year. We're in Europe quite a lot. And then I do probably 4 or 5 trips a year to scholarship academies, to start new academies or to check up on old academies or to take people on tours to current academies.
So how different is it raising a family or two kids in the countryside versus now in Dubai?
I think there's loads of opportunity here for stuff for kids to do, which is really exciting. And Dubai is an amazing place for activities for kids, right? And it's really exciting. It's also very entrepreneurial, so it's good fun for me to live in. If you like food, it's an amazing place for that. So we love going out and eating at restaurants, that sort of stuff. And so that's really good. Compared to the countryside, one thing we miss about the countryside, I guess, is all the fresh air and the seasons. We have a lot of heat here, which you might know. I don't know if you heard, I opened the window a second ago and we've actually got a huge storm going on right now. So I was a bit worried about the internet, but we're coming to the end now. We seem to have been all right. It's like when you're here a long time, you miss the cold weather, right? Like the skiing trips are amazing because my kids get to see snow and after being in the desert for so long. And so it's that cold, fresh mountain air that I think you start craving if you're not from the Middle East, right? But it's nice to have a balance. And we certainly see family a lot. Family come out here quite a lot. We miss family. We don't see them as much as we want to, but I think that we try and find that balance of giving our kids stability without traveling too much, where they're always moving around all the time.
Yeah. So what's the biggest cultural difference between the two countries that you've had to navigate? Maybe you didn't expect.
It's a really interesting question. Dubai is a real cultural melting pot. It's got so many different cultures here, which I really love, and a lot of people are very respectful here, which is really nice. I think it's very safe here. You've heard the stories in Dubai where people leave their phones on restaurant tables to secure their seat when they go to the toilet, this sort of stuff. It's all true. You very rarely hear about crime rate here, crimes happening, whereas back home you would. It's very safe, and there's lots of opportunity. In terms of culturally, I think that there's a lot of tolerance here. Because of the kind of melting pot of cultures, if I look outside, just across the road from me, you've got a Sikh temple, you've got a Catholic church, and you've got a mosque, right? People just live harmoniously side by side here. It's really incredible to see that. From a business point of view, I think, like I mentioned earlier, the big cultural aspect here is you can charge a premium amount for a premium service, but you've got to deliver. We've had a 1-star review because we didn't on Google because we didn't pick up the phone the first time. So you want to provide a great service out here. It's got to be world class. Like there are very few people in the middle. They're either really bad on their way out or at the very top. And so competitively, it's pretty ruthless out here from a competitive point of view. But if you're a competitive person like me, then it's not so much of an issue. You kind of see that as exciting and a bit of an adventure in itself to see if you can rise to the top of an industry within a country.
Yeah, great from a customer point of view, right? Like you want the best of the best. So I think that's awesome. A couple quick questions about you personally so people can know you. When is the last time you cried?
Oof. I realized I was older than one of my mentors who passed away. When I was 24 and I had this base jumping accident, I spent 2 years of rehab where I was learning to walk. They said I could never walk. While that was happening, I had 15 of my close friends die. So I was in this extreme sports group and I just watched them die one by one after the other. Good friends who I lived with for 3 months in the mountains and so on. So I think the realization that I had now grown beyond the years of those that I really looked up to. And I basically accessed this part of life which they were supposed to. But I made the most of those years. Yeah, that was a strong realization.
That's really sad. I know the same thing I hear about free climbers with Alex Honnold. It's not if you're going to get hurt, it's like when you're going to really get hurt.
Yeah.
Right? It's an
Yeah.
unfortunate part of business.
You say in base jumping, you kind of have two buckets. One bucket's full of luck, the other one's empty and it's an experience bucket. And you've got to try and fill up the experience before the luck runs out. The reality is most base jumpers, if they're lucky, they quit. Most people don't, right? The statistics speak for themselves with base jumping, which is why when I had kids, I just stopped doing it. It's way too risky for me to do when I have kids. It's a beautiful sport, but with all that beauty, things you'd never see. Human beings you can't fly a wingsuit through a waterfall after trekking next to deer in the Swiss Alps with all your mates and then not expect the world to balance itself out. It's that way in life, right? With all that beauty comes all that pain, and that's just the reality, I think.
Yeah, now you have to do boring stuff like jump out of helicopters or go skiing somewhere.
Yeah,
Sounds
I have to find a balance, right?
all right. That's funny.
What I will say though is maybe some dads or mums listening to this will relate. Having kids has been the greatest adventure of my life, and I don't just mean that in a cliche way. Quite literally, they are the most incredible teachers. And when my instructors come up to me and say, "Seb, my wife's pregnant. I'm going to have a child," I'm like, get ready for it, because when the student is ready, the master will appear, right? You learn so much about yourself having kids. It was baffling to me that something so typical and something that so many people do on the planet was so much more of an adventure than some of the unique things I've done around the world, which so few people have ever experienced. But it's true. That's the reality.
That's cool. I like that. When the student is ready, the master will appear. I'm going to share that. What's your okay? The next one. What's the biggest thorn in your side in terms of running the organization? Obviously, you have a lot of employees now, different countries, lots of moving plates at the same time. What's the biggest thorn in your side?
The biggest risk to my business is me getting bored.
Okay.
The reality there is if I get bored, I'll probably pour our resources into something new and exciting and shiny rather than just doing the basics that work. And so a lot of that comes down to accountability. Like I say the same thing of anything in my life. I'm the sort of person, like I said, who throws themselves into something completely brand new and really goes to town on it with an extreme work ethic. And so having an accountability sometimes to be a bit more patient is probably the biggest thing for me. Again, having kids teaches you patience as well.
What's your biggest fear?
Living a boring life.
Boring life. Okay.
Which is interesting, right? I was having a deep conversation with a psychologist about this, and she was like, what would make you worry that your life would be boring? And I was like, what would? Tricky question. Haven't been able to answer yet.
But how could your life be boring if your kids are your greatest adventure?
Exactly that, right?
Okay, last one. I'm going to pick a good one for you. Tell me one thing people don't know about you.
One thing people don't know about me. A lot of people don't know that I was terrible at languages in school, like really bad. We were learning French when I was younger. We have to in England, right? And I remember being told I was awful at learning languages, and so I always believed that. And so I've spent the last 2 months spending about 3 hours a day trying to learn Italian. And I'm starting to realize that maybe that teacher was right.
3 hours a day? That's so much.
Yeah,
3 hours a day.
Yeah, on walks and then on various notes I go through. 2 to 3 hours. I go on that 2 hour walk and I spend a lot of that practicing Italian. That's the last 3 months. And I spent the last 6 weeks in Italy and my Italian got worse.
Oh my God.
The reality there was they just wanted to speak English to me. But I can get away with the accents, right? I'm not too bad at doing accents and the speaking side, but the reading and writing of different languages just goes straight in my head. So I said to myself, I want to try and become fluent in a different language before my daughter is born in August. So I've got another 5 months or so. It's a pretty tough challenge, but I'll see what I can do.
That is a tough challenge. Wow.
See if I can prove that French teacher wrong. Madame Lafarge, if you're listening to this, let's see if I can prove you wrong.
All right, I want to do one more. What job would you not do even if you made $1 million a month?
I would be a lumberjack during the summer and a ski instructor during the winter.
No. Opposite of that. What job would you not do?
Oh, not do. Okay. I'll give you a different answer there. What job would I not do? What job would I, apart from anything unethical?
Yeah,
I'm a character development organisation, so anything criminal I probably shouldn't do. What job would I not do? As in, what job would I hate or find boring or?
I don't care how much money I make. I can't do that.
There's no way I'd do it. Like something to do with something claustrophobic, right? Like deep sea mining. Forget it. I've done some of the scariest things that a human being can do, but there's no way you get me diving down into some deep, tiny hole where I have to try and squeeze through. Just there's so much better things to do in life. I'm not doing that. That is not for me. I'm out. Nope.
You need big open spaces to jump through.
Exactly, yeah. Big open spaces, lots of freedom, no mining for me. So probably mining, actually. Yeah.
Mining. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for being on here. It's really fun talking to you and hearing the very unique journey in your martial arts career that I don't know anyone else who does anything like it. So very cool to see. I'm excited, hopefully, to see a documentary in 3 to 5 years that will come out. So I hope that goes well. I have a sister who works at Netflix. I don't know if that will help you whatsoever when it comes to it.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you for that. That'd be great.
Yeah, my pleasure. And then if someone wants to reach out to you because they have questions, what's the best way to find you?
So you can email my assistant, Sarah. She is ea@sebastianbates.com. I actually gave up emails about a year ago, so I just do WhatsApp now for everything. WhatsApp voice messages kind of stepped away from me. So she helps me with processing any kind of requests or bookings. If you want to book me for a podcast, she can help with that. Book me to do a talk, she can help with that. If you want to learn more about the charity, she can help with that. Or you can visit thebatesfoundation.com. I've also got a website, sebastianbates.com, or Instagram, seb.bates, or Sebastian Bates on LinkedIn. So you've got all those.
Good. Awesome. Thank you for listening. My name is Matthew Brenner with Black Belt Business. If you want to learn how to grow your martial arts school organically without relying on ads through your local schools, daycares, and businesses, we call that the Triangle Codex. If you want to learn that process so you can do it year after year and not rely on giving money to Facebook to grow your school, you can email me, Matthew@doubleyourdojo.com, or find me on Instagram at blackbeltbrenner1 for also more podcast episodes and clips. Thank you, guys.